I'll start with a brief story, and this is where I'll base my talk. I am born from Uganda. That's where I grew up, and that's where I was raised. And whereas I never witnessed the genocide of Rwanda, my family did. And I have lived hearing stories about the genocide right from my childhood. You might ask yourself, why the genocide, yet you're from Rwanda? I come from Kisoro, and Kisoro is a district in the southwestern part of Uganda. The hill or the mountain you're seeing there is bordering it's bordering Rwanda and Congo. So my home is on the slopes of the mountain. And because I was born from the border, I have experiences from Congo and then from Rwanda. That's why I can share a story about Rwanda and then share some stories from Congo and then share some stories from Uganda. I'll start with my personal story. One time I was walking on the streets of Kampala, which is the capital of Uganda, and one person saw me, and you know what they said? Oh, hey, check him. These are the Rwandese who have come to our country. What are they doing in our country? Can't they go back to where they belong? I was like, well, from what I know, I'm a Ugandan. I don't know why everyone points at me as a Rwandan or as a Rwandese. And when I went back home, I asked Mom, I was like, Mom, tell me this. Why is that everyone here calls me a Rwandan, yet I am a Ugandan? Then Mom was like, oh, well, I'll give you a small story about that. Is that your ancestry is from Rwanda. And again, Collins, you speak the language with them. And again, your looks define you as a Rwandan, not as a Ugandan. I was like, then why would everyone be against me for that? I was like, that's the world we are in. People will always identify with your looks, identify with your language. And some will hate you for that, whereas others will actually love you for that. Because maybe they identify with you. Then I also asked Mom another question. Then tell me this. Why is it that when you grew with Dad, he never took fish, he never ate fish? And Mom went ahead and gave me another story. Said, Collins, in the 1994 Rwandan genocide, the massacres against the Tutsi, people would be killed and their bodies would be thrown into rivers and lakes. And rivers and lakes are habitats for fish. So your dad could never eat fish because he would be eating the remains of his brothers and sisters who died in the Rwandan genocide. I was like, okay, now I get the reason behind that. On the slide there, the last picture is my home district, and it is as beautiful as you can see. But when I was working for the Doctors of Global Health, we were working in the communities neighboring Rwanda and Congo, but basically on the Bunagana border, whereby there were attacks from the M23. The M23 is a militia group that operates in North Kivu, and we found ourselves working in the community that was neighboring that, so I have stories about it. But I can never talk about the M23 without talking about the Rwandan genocide, because the massacres and the militia of the M23 are a result of the 1994 genocide. So to start with, I'll talk about the Rwandan genocide. And like I said in the beginning, viewer discretion is highly recommended. Please, you might see some really bad images, and you will bear with the slides, because that's the topic for today. When I was preparing the slide, I was getting emotional, but when you can see, I'm the one in the picture with the driver that we had gone with to visit the Memorial Center in Kigali. That's the capital of Rwanda. And what I saw there was really disheartening. It was emotional, arousing, but there is a story behind this, and this one rates way back in the history of colonization, whereby people were meant to identify themselves with an identity card which either showed that you were a Tutsi or a Hutu, and this was a tool of colonization used by the Belgians. And the Belgians, the people from Belgium, were, I would think they had no clue this would, at the end of the day, lead to a genocide, because this was way back in 1959. They had no clue this would, at the end of the day, cause the suffering that went on for only 3 months, but claimed over 1 million. Actually, those are estimates. Nobody knows the exact number, but we say between 800,000 to 1 million Tutsis were killed. And this was so horrible that the Belgians were identifying people, and this is a description given by Huntington Speak. Huntington, when he was describing these kinds of people, he said, well, there are these types of people in Rwanda. There is this person with a flat nose and a wide mouth, and is like a chimpanzee, meaning the Hutu. And then there's also this other person that is smart in all ways and outstanding. And then, to make matters worse, went ahead and gave people IDs, identity cards, and on the identity card they would ask you to say what you are. In other words, are you a Tutsi or are you a Hutu? So people who went to school, like kids who would go to school, they had identity cards, and they would proudly say, well, this is my ID, and who are you? I'm a Hutu, I'm a Tutsi. So there was segregation right away from school, knowing that I belong to the superior tribe, and the other one knowing I belong to the inferior tribe. But what is this inferiority I'm talking about? This was based, whereas some say it was based on blood types, which I agree with at some point, and then others would say it was based on the positions, right? Like, you would qualify to be a Hutu if you'd amass, if you'd get richer, you would in other words be called a Tutsi. And then because the Tutsi were known as cattlers, like they were herdsmen, and they were rich, and then they were prominent just because they had identified with the Belgians, and then they were given all the power in government. But then there was this revolt that came up. It was termed the Hutu power. The Hutu power. They said, well, we are tired of being oppressed, and they said, we gotta do something about this. So what happened next is that when they, in 1962, when Rwanda was granted independence, and because it was democratic and the Hutu are more, like, they outweigh the Tutsi, they took over. In other words, the people who had been oppressed are taking over power. So there is always that kind of lingering resentment of, we have been under your torment for many years with the Belgians, we have to pay back. So when they took over power, now the oppressor became the oppressed. In other words, the Tutsi were to feel it because they had always been told to be superior by the colonialists. And that was the whole story of the genocide. But then in 1962, when the Hutu took over, we see that there were mass migrations. Many people had to leave Rwanda, especially the Tutsi. About 140,000 people left for Uganda. And then when they reached Uganda, and actually at some point they were given citizenship, like Uganda will come to them and recognize them. Only after 4 years, the government revoked their citizenship, and then they had to make a militia called the Rwandan Patriotic Front, which is led by President Kagame, who is the president of Rwanda right now. So when Uganda denied them citizenship that they had enjoyed for 4 years, and they had to make this militia to liberate themselves, to go back to Rwanda and regain their country, or like have identity of being like countrymen of Rwanda. So when that time reached, and Kagame had like already gathered some good men like to fight for him, that was the whole start of the genocide that you hear of, because we remember that there had been talks to bring back the Tutsi who had been misplaced, but these talks were not yielding anything. But when the president by then, who is President Habyarimana, was a Hutu, was flying from Arusha, because there were talks to reintegrate people, to bring them back. When he was traveling from Arusha, his plane was shot. When his plane was shot, the news that spread said that the Tutsi had shot down the plane. That was an allegation. We have no proof of who shot down the plane. It could be true that even the Hutu might have shot down the plane so that they would have more reasons to carry out the massacres. So this question remains hanging. Even today, the ICC still wants to open up charges against the president of Rwanda, but they have no evidence of who shot the plane down. Nonetheless, at that point, there was a radio station. Yesterday, we talked about what mass media can do, and I brought it up. But there was a radio station called RTLM, and this radio station was used by the Hutu to communicate the plans of executing the Tutsi. So they said, well, our president has been killed, and he has been killed by the militias, the RPF militias, who are the Tutsi. And so we have to act really fast, and we have to act and make sure that we wipe away everything. I'll quote one of the statements. The cockroaches, they referred to the Tutsi as cockroaches. The cockroaches have already started invading us, and they have killed our president. So wherever you see a cockroach, do not spare it, kill it, or else you'll be the one to be killed. This was a radio station, and this radio station was so popular because it used to play rock music, it used to play pop music, so people would always tune in and listen to that. But this was used later on as a weapon for executing the genocide. And neighbors were turning against neighbors, people were killing people, and these were people who had once lived in harmony. But because there was this kind of hatred that was perpetrated by the radio station, and in a span of 100 days, that was from April to July, we registered the kinds of numbers I told you of 1 million, between 800 to 1 million. And I also talk about people, the Tutsis, who were trying to seek refuge during that time. They sought refuge in churches, others sought refuge in the nearby schools. I want to show you an image. Of one of the technical institutes called Murambi, where the Tutsis went to seek refuge, and actually they were promised that they would be safe. But when they had reached there, the Hutu who had promised them refuge had to lock them inside, and none of them escaped the death because they detonated them. They had put bombs, and then they blasted the building. And today it stands to be there. And these are the remains of all the people that were killed in Murambi Technical Institute, which is now Murambi Genocide Memorial Center. And all people who were there were killed. There are many more other atrocities. We talked about what kind of weapons were used to carry out the genocide. Well, there were guns that were used, but in 100 days, there weren't only guns. They were mostly traditional tools, machetes, pangas, things like this. Pangas, a neighbor would get a panga and kill a neighbor just because of their nose size. Like I told you, the Belgians were using nasal calipers to measure the nose of the Tutsi, so the Hutu knew who they were looking for. And actually, if you are a Hutu and you wanted to give refuge to a Tutsi and you were discovered, you'd also be killed. So you always desisted from harboring a Tutsi in your home. So they used pangas, they used machete, they used stones, they used spears, just like hunting, like you go hunting in the traditional African society. And we saw many people trying to escape. They tried to escape from the killings, but they couldn't escape because they were roadblocks. In at least every 100 meter, you would get a roadblock that was blocking people from running away. You would not escape anything because they were the majority, and like everybody was being inspired by the radio station that was going on. And I want to tell you how serious it was that they even had to come up with commandments. We call them the Hutu commandments. And a newspaper by then called Kangula had to like write them down. And actually on a radio station, these 10 commandments were there. I won't go through them, but one of them were like, we should wipe out all the cockroaches, referring to the Tutsi. And whoever would be fined, actually, we should not even marry the Tutsi. That was one of the 10 commandments that they had. And they were using social media, they were using mass media to execute all those killings. That's another photo of, many people, young and old, that had been killed and bulldozed. And, I remember asking Dad, because I was only 1 year old. I wasn't old enough, but my brother and my mom and my dad have a good history about it. I asked them, how could this happen in such a short period of time? They said, well, because they are using traditional tools to kill people, they would gather them in a certain place, and either throw them in pit latrines, right? Because killing a person with a panga would take long, but whenever they would get a chance to kill you, they would do that. But then because the best fast way to do it was tie them up and then throw them in pit latrines. And my parents and my relatives will tell you that they witnessed this, those who survived the genocide. And then I'll go right ahead and talk about churches, whereby people thought that by going to churches they would be safe, but it never turned out to be the case, because they thought, okay, who can attack us from a church? Because we thought that people had this reverence for God and they would not come to attack in a church, but it never worked. I'll show you a church in Tarama. People went to the church and they thought that, okay, the Hutu will not really come to kill us from a church. But in a while they came and actually bulldozed, and right now we have mass graves there. We have mass graves of people who died, and when you go there now, what you find are skulls, which are remains of the people who were killed. That said about the Rwandan genocide. How do we come to the M23 group, which I witnessed with my own eyes in 2012 as I worked with the Doctors for Global Health? The Doctors for Global Health is based in New York, and they always send students to practice their residence, and I was a translator, like I said. So after in 1994, after the genocide, when RPF, which is the Rwandan Patriotic Front, took over. When the RPF took over in July, that was around July 7th rather, when the RPF took over, the Hutu who had been executing, or the perpetrators of genocide, had to flee away from Rwanda, because they thought, oh, well, the people who have been oppressing have taken over, so we are not safe. They might retaliate, or they might try to punish us for our wrongs. So what they did, they had to migrate. They had to go to the neighboring countries, and one of the neighboring countries was Congo, and especially the North Kivu part of Congo. So when they were in the north part of Kivu of Congo, when they moved away, they didn't move away alone. There were some Tutsi who had already moved to the North Kivu of Congo and were already living there. But then they had to live together in Congo. I want to tell you that for 2 years, when they were in the camps in North Kivu, they still executed people, they still killed people. The Interahamwe, who are the Hutu, still were carrying out killings. And at some point, because these were many people who were settling there in the camp in North Kivu, there was an outbreak of cholera, a disease, because of the poor conditions of living that were there. The sanitation was so poor. And that's the time we saw the international community responding to give aid. It is recorded that that was the widespread, like the most recorded response from the international community to help people. But you know what? In less than 2 weeks, 30,000 people had died of the disease. Over 30,000 people had died of the disease. So there was now I'm talking about the M23, which is the March 23, which comes from an accord that they had made a deal with the government of Congo to be integrated or to be recognized as well as citizens of Congo, because there was this kind of regional imbalances. And because the M23 is mostly Tutsi people who lead the team, and they felt like the government wasn't considering the people of North Kivu, and the government of Congo was also harboring the warlords of the Rwandan genocide. So the M23 woke up and had to get this uprising, and because they were like, no, we can't keep living with people who killed our brothers, whereas we are now in Congo and we have been like assimilated in the system. We are still being oppressed. We are still not satisfied with the services. So the government of Congo tried to bring them back, tried to have talks with them, but the talks never once yielded anything. They tried to integrate the army, the militias of the M23 into the national army, but still that didn't help at all. There was a faction of the national army, and that's the M23 I'm talking about. I'll show you something here about M23. These are the M23 that I'm talking about. I'm going to make you watch one of the videos, because when I was working in 2012, like I told you, I was working in the community. Certain days we would be going to work, like wake up, you drive the car to go to work, and you think everything is normal, and only to your surprise, you find yourself running for your life. So I'll show you one of the videos of the things I witnessed with the students from New York. And that's the first link. I'll ask my friend to play that.
The government of the Democratic Republic of Congo has rejected M23 rebel calls for truce talks in the east of the country. Faced with a growing refugee crisis, as most of the city of Goma's million-strong population seeks to escape, the government's bracing itself for a full-scale rebel assault of the regional capital. The government accuses M23 of being in the pay and control of neighbouring Rwanda. They, in turn, accuse the government of failing to integrate their forces into the national army, a breaking of the terms to a 2009 peace deal. Our main objective was just to arrive here and show the main aim of our cause. We have no intention of going into Goma, but if the Congolese army attacks us, we'll enter the city. The UN supports the government claim that the rebels are a Rwandan creation, while Kigali asserts they are just seeking to control valuable mineral rights. The UN has thousands of troops in Goma and has been providing helicopter strikes to support government troops.
That's it. Thank you so much. Yeah, that's the brief history of the M23 as atrocities. And so when I worked with the refugees, what did I see? I want to break it down really small. I saw young kids being brought to us to work, because this was a medical team, so we would have to work with refugees and we would be overwhelmed with numbers that we couldn't save everybody. So I witnessed seeing people dying, and most of the time we couldn't get where to bury them, and then we were being overwhelmed by the numbers, and what happened was that they would have to arrange a special place for burying them. Then we saw young kids who had been raped. We don't know why raping has always been used by by many militias as a weapon, but with so many people had been raped and being put under my custody as a translator, and the emotions that it arouses and the memories it created are all indelible. And when I remember that, I can only think of, okay, isn't there always a way of creating peace without war? That's a question that I have never answered myself. But if
we need to interject here and allow a few minutes for questions. We've got about 10, 12 minutes that we could take some questions. So who would like to raise a question? Use the mic up here, if you will, please. Yeah.
Yep.
So why did they start to kill the other
Yeah, I had her question. She's asking why would the Hutu start to kill the Tutsi? Or the major reason. Okay, like I told you, this started way back in 1959, whereby there was this kind of the Tutsi monarchy in Rwanda, whereby the Tutsi had been superior and they were given more favor by the colonialists. So the Hutu were like, we have been under your oppression for long. So since there has been a democratic system and because we are the majority and we have taken over government, we shall surely pay back for your long deeds and for the deeds of always describing us as your slaves.
Oh, okay, so that was the reason they started creating that hatred.
Yeah, and then again, like in one of the descriptions on the radio station, they said the Tutsi are from Ethiopia. They should go back to Ethiopia and not live in Rwanda. And they should not actually go back to Ethiopia alive. They should go back dead. Yeah, that was serious.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Another question?
Thank you so much. Yeah, I'm in South Dakota as a student, and I'm doing my master's in plant science, though today I'm talking about political science. And I applied like any other student, and I was so lucky that I got in touch with my supervisor, who is Dr. Emmanuel. Can he wave to you, Dr. Emmanuel? He's right there. He's my supervisor, and I think he has a story about that better than I do, because I think he was born by the time those things were happening. So he must be having much better crew than I do have. Yeah, that's how I got here. Thank you. Yeah.
Tell them too a little bit about your future plans, Colin.
Oh yes, I intend to go back to Uganda and work with the community, especially in the area of agriculture, because one of the threats we have, even when you talk about the political threats, we have the food insecurity threats. So as an agricultural actor, I hope to implement that when I go back home to Uganda, and yeah, that's my plan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And John? Yeah.
It's a pretty loaded question. What can we learn, take away from that?
Okay.
Everything that you just described, that something like that doesn't happen again. I mean,
Okay.
this is the way you see it, of course, and the way that you've experienced it. What can we do?
Okay. Thank you so much, John. That was supposed to be part of my conclusions about what should we learn from this. I truly believe there is always a way of amicably solving these kind of differences that always come up amongst people. Differences of race, differences of who is superior and who is inferior, all those are man-made. But I always believe that we are one. We are one, and that's the human race. If we can approach it in that scenario that, okay, what if what is being done to me or what is being done to others would be done to me, how would I feel? In other words, if we can take up the shoes of other people, then we would always learn to accommodate each other no matter the differences, be it differences of blood, be it differences of race, be it differences of superiority and inferiority. We should always see ourselves as one. And there is always nothing like shedding blood to stop shedding blood. That would never be my approach to situations. And like I told you, these are developing democracies. If we can spread the news of democracy, of dialogue, there can always be a way of agreement. This hunger for power, this thirst for dominance, if that would be like streamlined, there's this kind of equitability that people are treated equitably, and then there's this kind of regional balance, there would be no such uprisings. But then, is that possible? So if it's not possible, is bloodshed the right way to go? It's a question for me and for you. It's a question for me and for you.
Do you think there was a time in Rwanda before the atrocities started that the Clinton administration could have intervened and could have prevented the atrocities?
I'm glad you brought up that one. I was trying to dodge it, but I never wanted to talk about Clinton. Yeah, because there was a call. I wish I could play the video, but it's okay. There was a call for international intervention, and whereas we had the United Nations Assistance Mission in Rwanda, which was led by Romeo, he had no way of stopping the violence because it wasn't in their region of operation. In other words, he wasn't supposed to attack people unless they were attacking the UN mission team. So we record Clinton somewhere is recorded regretting that had I responded to the call to help Rwanda, the thousands of people that died would have not died. In other words, there was this reluctance from Clinton administration to send his troops to Rwanda. And Rwanda, still the president is recorded saying, there is a way these people always selectively respond to atrocities, and Rwanda has been a victim of whereby nobody responded while we cried for help from them. So the Clinton administration is blamed for that. They took long to respond, and in 100 days many people died.
We have time for one final question if somebody would like to raise one.
Yeah.
Sort of a couple of parts. I wonder if you've had any experience talking to any of the people that actually did the killing. If you've been able to talk to anybody that actually was engaged in a genocide. And I'm also interested in religion often gets blamed for being a cause of differences, but it seems that before the genocide, that the Tutsis shared a common Christian belief in that.
You're right. You're right.
I'm wondering if you know of ways in which refugees that were doing the killing somehow reconcile or justify these actions with their religious beliefs, or if that came into play at all.
That's a good question. I have not gotten a chance to talk to the killers, but I have heard testimonies of the killers. The killers will say that we never killed because we wanted. We killed because we also knew that when we don't kill, we shall be killed. So there are confessions of people saying, I killed my brother, but we used to play soccer together. We were neighbors and we were living in harmony. But because there was this kind of rule from above that we were supposed to kill them because they were against us, we had to kill, not because we wanted. So right now there is reconciliation going on in Rwanda. And maybe one thing I have to say is that reconciliation is the wrong process. You find like people, there is a semblance of peace. I must say that Rwanda is a fast-growing economy now, but reconciliation is a slow process that is going on. There is now something called gacaca. Gacaca is like, it's like a court, a local court system whereby people meet and settle their differences. So people come and confess, oh, well, I am the one who killed your brother, and I am sorry that I did this. People have forgiven others, but some will come and say, well, I forgave him because I was afraid that he might do it again. So I just wanted to say that I forgave him, but I actually still feel the agony of what they did to my family. Well, people are orphaned. Let me tell you, people were left with HIV because this was used as a weapon by the Hutu to wipe away the Tutsi. So people, imagine an orphan like me, sorry, I'm not an orphan because of genocide, but orphans who were left, or people who are HIV victims because of the act of genocide. They have wounds that will take long to heal. And then your other question about the church or the religion, whereas there's nowhere it is recorded that it was used as a justification of what they were doing, we have cases in Uganda whereby the Lord's Resistance Army started as a Holy Spirit movement, and they said that they are going to rule Uganda based on the 10 Commandments. And they are using the Bible, but later on this turned out to be a militia that lasted for more than 2 decades, killing people in the northern part of Uganda. But for Rwanda, no. Yeah, I don't remember any justification for that.
Well, thank you, Collins, very much for this presentation. It's been a fascinating presentation, a very informed presentation. And I, for one, would just like to say thank you for being a part of our community and for bringing the gifts that you do here.
Thank you. Thank you so much.